How did you get a high school bully to never mess with you again? A group of sociopaths from school that always tormented us followed me and my friends to my house one day in a pickup truck. They stole my friend's shoes, pushed one of them until she fell, and took my sketch pad and threw it in a puddle. My stepbrother came outside, beat one of them badly, stole his pants and threw his keys into a sewer grave before hitting him with an empty vodka bottle. It was traumatizing for me on both ends, but that group of kids never even looked at us again. Out of all the things that stepbrother did, I think the most embarrassing thing was that he stole the guy's pants. It's kind of hard to be a bully without those. Story 2. She told me my face made her want to unalive herself, so I told the school counselor that she had confided in me she wanted to commit unalive. She had to explain to everyone what she really said. She would call me fat and ugly every day. She also would tell me I was trash because I was adopted. Your own mother thought you were so ugly she didn't want you. Yeah, she sounds like a real turd. But let's make one thing clear. If you're adopted, those are bragging rights. The fact that somebody literally chose you and loves you because of how great and awesome you are is way more impressive than being the biological child of somebody and them just kind of being stuck with you no matter what. So keep your head up. Story 3. I kicked him hard in the balls in the middle of history class sophomore year. He had all of the guys in our grade moo at me in the hallway when we'd change classes. I put up with it for a week until I snapped and started beating the crap out of him with my history book. Got him up against the wall and kicked him as hard as I could. Legit don't remember kicking him, but I remember my foot was sweaty, which has snapped me out of it. The teacher made us both go in the hallway and explain what happened, so I told him everything. Surprisingly, I never got in trouble. The next year I had to sit behind him in homeroom, and one day he just randomly turned around and apologized. I apologized for kicking him and he said he totally deserved it. Senior year, I made everybody in the class Christmas ornaments with all our names on them, and he got all teared up when he got his. So, not a bad ending. Ah, that's sweet. Story 4. I grew up in a rough area. Fortunately, I was attending the same school as my older brothers who would look out for me. For a while, I had been targeted and picked on by a particular individual, and his entourage would cackle like hyenas every time he pulled my tie, kicked my shin, or shoved me. I had no idea who these bullies were, but I was a geeky kid, so I can only assume he'd seen me as an easy target. So after relentless bump-ins with this guy, he took things too far and shoved me down a long flight of stairs at the school. I was only a little hurt, but pretty shook up. As I heard the echoes of his friends laughing and walking down the hallway, I immediately went to find my brother and ask him if he could beat up my bully. My brother walked around school with me trying to find where this guy would hang out at lunch. Once we found him, my brother said to me, "You go and beat him up." I was pretty taken aback because I thought he'd agree to fight him for me. Again, I was a geeky kid. I started to back out. When my brother said, "Fine, let him bully you," suddenly I was back in. But I didn't know how to fight. "I've got your back, don't worry," my brother said, trying to reassure me. So I walk up to the guy and I just start hitting, and I hit him a lot. The next thing I know, he's on all fours and the adrenaline is running through me. I'm expecting his group to retaliate and beat the crap out of me. I'm slowly starting to think this was a terrible idea, but they don't. They're just shocked, completely stunned. So the adrenaline is just pumping and all I can think to blurt out is, "Kiss my shoe!" Now, in my head, I'm thinking this is now some movie level, all eyes on me moment and I'm killing it. My bully on the floor looks up and says, "What?" I replied, "Kiss my freaking shoe!" Again, thinking I'm gangster. And he does. He kisses my shoe and I beeline it towards my brother. As we're walking away together, my brother was incredibly proud of me for sticking up for myself, but leans in and says, "You really gotta work on your crap talk though. Why the heck did you make him kiss your shoe?" Besides the incredible cringe talk, they never bothered me again, although I did get crap from other bullies. It's not exactly Braveheart, but it'll do. Story 5. Middle school. The bully challenged me to a fight after school. I told him to meet me on the soccer field, which happened to be visible from where my bus home would park. I made sure to get out of school as quickly as possible and sat on the bus so I could clearly see the field. As I expected, he never showed up. The next day at school, I announced loudly so several classmates could hear, "Jason, you never showed up for our fight. I waited there after school and you never showed up. You were a freaking chicken." That was the end of the bullying. Story 6. A bully was harassing my daughter on the bus. Instead of calling his folks or jumping on him, I did this. I pulled him aside at the bus stop one day and asked for his help. "Hey Danny, I was hoping you could help me out. I guess there's this kid on the bus who is picking on my daughter. She's a girl and small, and I'd like for you to help protect her. If you see anything like that, could you stick up for her, please, and let me know about it?" That was the end of the bullying. That is some crazy Jedi mind level trickery that is going on by this dad. Freaking out psychology, the kid. Story 7. Played the crazy card. My cousin started dating his, edit, the bully's sister, and I guess he didn't like that. so he came after me. It escalated more and more to the point we nearly threw down in the middle of class one day, but the teacher stopped us. She made me stay after class and talk me down, saying she knew he instigated it and I wasn't the problem, but she couldn't have this exploding in her class again, which I felt was fair of her. A couple days later, as I was getting stuff at my locker, he was standing behind me when I turned around and slapped my books out of my hand and said, "Let's go!" I rolled my eyes, held up a finger, and said, "Just a second." I then turned around and started hitting my head against my locker. The great thing about an empty steel locker is that you don't have to hit it very hard for it to make a big sound. So while I was really not hitting it that hard, to him, it looked and sounded like I was just wailing on it. After a few of those, I spun around and screamed at him to come at me. His eyes went wide and he just backed away slowly in front of everyone in the hallway and never messed with me again. Reminds me of the Grinch scene where he's trying to scare Cindy Lou. "Careful, I'm a psycho." Story 8. He tried to shove me down an embankment while on a field trip. Had I fallen, I would have broken my leg or worse, because the embankment ended about 25 feet down, then dropped off into some steep brush and trees. Anyhow, my best friend was next to me and said, "Watch it!" as he came at me. I sidestepped him and he tumbled down the embankment and over the edge into the brush. Fractured several ribs, dislocated his shoulder, and broke his ankle. He never did anything to me again. Screw you, Darren, you turd! We don't know if he really learned his lesson or if he just physically wasn't able to bully anybody anymore. That sounds extremely brutal. Story 9. Not a bully per se, but a real turd. In my French class, a guy who sat behind me would always kick my chair repeatedly, and I was at the point where I was visibly infuriated by this happening every lesson. The girl who sat next to me turned to him and said, "Hey, you should probably stop doing that. He looks like he's about to hit you." Guy laughed it off and said I wouldn't. I didn't, but I turned around and cocked my arm back. He was leaning back on the hind legs of his chair with his feet on mine, so when I did this, he flinched, fell backwards off his chair, and got a few laughs from the people behind us. He never kicked my chair after that. Ah, c'est la vie. Story 10. I always punched my bullies square in the nose. Sure, they may kick my butt, but I was more than willing to dish some pain out while receiving it. After a few times, they went after targets that didn't fight back. They want easy control, and they're just as afraid of pain as you are. Every new school was another bully. Let one person walk on you and everyone will walk on you. Either make boundaries or be a doormat. Don't be afraid of consequences. That's how bullies keep you in control. Just start swinging. Not to condone violence, but this is actually great advice. You don't have to win, you just have to show you're not going to take it lying down. And you just gotta land one lucky shot like Jose Ramirez. Anderson goes down! Story 11. I was in 4th grade and I had just moved to a new school. I was being bullied by another kid on my bus for being the new kid. Looking back, he may have just been trying to look tough in front of his friends. One day, as we were boarding the bus after school, he started it again. Shoving and name-calling, I think. I'd have enough, so I turned around and punched him right in the nose. I don't think I hit him hard enough to cause a nosebleed, but it was enough to hurt. I remember that his nose felt squishy. Anyway, he looked shocked. I probably also looked shocked. I regained my composure faster and told him to not do it again. He tried to act tough and said some things, but that was the last time he ever bothered me. This was early mid-80s. So there were no bus monitors, no cameras, and the bus driver was standing outside. I never got in trouble for it. Story 12. A friend of mine was being bullied at school decades ago, and after a few days of it, he stood up to the bully and said, "Listen, if you keep doing this, we're gonna fight, and you may beat me, but we're gonna fight again, and you're going to have to fight me every day until you leave me alone." The kid left him alone. Hey, sometimes all you gotta do is show up and put up a fight. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Story 13. I recall when I graduated elementary school and moved on to junior high school, most of the kids in my class came from a different school. As a shy outsider, I got shunned by pretty much everyone. One kid took that as an invitation to start picking on me. I probably could have just punched him, but I didn't like fighting. I did like to draw, so I began drawing horrible cartoons depicting him as this fat, gluttonous idiot who would inevitably end up mutilated by the end of the story. Those cartoons became extremely popular in the class, and that kid ended up having a really crabby time at school. Looking back at it with adult eyes, it definitely went too far. He grew up with all those kids, but he wasn't popular, and I think he thought bullying me would finally be his way in with them. After the cartoons, they all ended up bullying him to the point he didn't come to school for a couple of weeks. Part of me regrets what happened, but the other half of me still feels like he got what he deserved. I guess the final lesson is, kids are all buttholes. I don't like any type of bullying. It sucks that, he he's just trying to fit in and he's a turd, and it sounds like it definitely did go too far and he got humiliated. But on the other hand, like, that's incredibly genius as a child to come up with that as a defense. Oh yeah? I'll paint a picture of you looking stupid. Well, it worked. Story 15. I either befriended them or befriended other kids who are bigger/stronger and didn't mind protecting me. In my experience, most bullies are lonely and sad. I would just try to make them laugh, and that usually worked. That said, it doesn't always work, and you have to stand up for yourself sometimes. One time in elementary school, 2 kids who liked to bully other kids took my lunchbox and started playing monkey in the middle with it. I played along for a minute, running back and forth, but it just kept going. So I looked at the kid who currently had my lunchbox and said, "You, give it back or I'm going to come after you. If you throw it to the other kid, I'm not going to chase after my lunchbox. I'm just going to tackle you with everything I have." Both kids laughed. I walked over to get my lunchbox and he threw it to the other kid. So I started sprinting at the kid who threw it like I said I would. He tried to run away while yelling, "I don't have it!" But I tackled him to the ground, which knocked the wind out of him. After I stood up, I looked at the other kid who has my lunchbox. He just walked over, gave it back, and said, "Sorry." Story 16. It wasn't high school, but it was a summer camp and I was about 8 or 9 years old. This slightly older kid was always a huge bully. Just total D-bag for nothing. I went home and told my dad about it and he said, "Next time he does something, punch him in the face. And if you do, I'll take you to a baseball game." Next day at camp, I was minding my own business on the Foursquare line. He came up and said something and I punched this guy right in the face. He was shocked, never said one bad thing to me ever again, and let me cut him in Foursquare line in my next turn. It was actually a great life lesson on how to stand up for yourself. I didn't start going around picking on kids or needlessly beating people up, but I was never bullied again. And yes, my dad took me to a ball game. Story 17. In 7th grade, a kid that sat behind me in language arts wouldn't stop flicking my ear. For months. Constant laughing from the rest of the class. One day I told him if he did it again, I'd stab him with my sharpened number 2. The class went, "Ooh," and 10 seconds later he flicked my ear. I put that pencil all the way through his hand and broke off the tip in the desk. Nobody ever messed around with me again. He got suspended the rest of the week. I had a conference with my parents and went back the next day. Turns out the pen is mightier than the sword after all. Story 19. He took a swing. I ducked. I pushed, shoved him against a wall of lockers as hard as I could. He bounced off and came back wildly swinging. I ducked again, repeated the shove even harder. This time he slowly kind of slid down on his butt to the floor. I pointed a finger at him and said, "Stay down." Never bothered me again. Administration tried to suspend me over it, and my father went down and raised hell. Carlos got suspended. I did not. This was 1983, by the way. That is one of the sweetest moves I've ever heard, especially to be as a kid. You fight off your bully and you deliver a Batman line. "Huh, stay down." Story 20. This guy harassed me for 2 years while I was going to middle school. He would try to cut my way and try to kick my butt every freaking day. One day he came with a few more kids a few years younger than us and challenged me to a fight. I said okay. Threw my bag to the ground and put myself in a defensive position. He tried a few kicks, a few weak punches, and I blocked all of them with the techniques I learned from watching kung fu movies. I never tried to hit him, just blocked. After a minute or so, I said, "You are boring, I'm going home." I picked up my bag and went home. Never heard from him again. What is this kid, the Dragon Warrior? That sounds awesome. Story 21. Started rugby in grade 10. Stood up to him in grade 11 and he got mad and he tried to kick me. I was almost 6 foot by then, but always tall and weak. Well, training for rugby sort of fixed that a little, so when he kicked me, I caught his foot, and when I let it go, it was above my head. He fell backwards and landed on the back of his head. He never talked to me again. Story 22. After years of mental and sometimes physical abuse from this girl and her followers, I was depressed, angry, and occasionally scared. She and her group were torturous to quite a few kids. I wanted her to stop. I stole a pen that was a novelty pen from her that she loved showing off, specially made and had her name on it. Also stole a small sparkly journal from her backpack as well. I made sure to steal some of her homework from the trash cans occasionally. She had some writing in it, general teen girl stuff and things about how stupid she thought some people were and how easy it was to make fun of them. I practiced her handwriting for a bit, then I wrote down a pretend kill list with my own name at the top. Plans of how each one could be done, little confessions about hurting animals, generally screwed up stuff. I read a lot as a kid and got some good motivation from many of my books. Then I wiped the cover and pen off and tucked the pen into the spiral binding and left it in the basket under her desk for the teacher to find. Let's just say the school didn't believe her when she said she didn't write those things. She got expelled, which made me feel warm and fuzzy. Holy crap, did this girl end up becoming Jason Bourne? Like, how do you even think of something like that? That is hilariously awesome, and good on you. You defended yourself in one of the craziest ways I think I've ever heard. Story 23. This was 25 years ago. I yelled really loud in the school cafeteria. "Kevin, I'm not gay! Stop asking me if you can see my scrotum after school!" Everyone heard it and looked at him. Everyone thought he was gay after that. That wasn't a label anyone wanted back then, true or otherwise. He never even looked at my direction again. He doesn't specify whether or not he looked at his bully, Kevin, so I hope there weren't multiple of them, or else they're all very, very confused. Story 24. I had a bully who messed with me literally every day and made my life hell for over a year. It was documented, but school staff never acted. Had enough of getting picked on, so one day decided I wasn't going to put up with it. He came up behind me and slammed my face into my locker. His MO. So I turned around and hit him. Did not stop hitting him until he was unconscious. Track coach asked why. I said, I had to handle the problem because you refused to. I got banned from school sports, but nobody ever gave me a hard time for the remainder of high school. And you know what? If it didn't work out, sounds like he was a track athlete, could have easily run away. Story 25. I was the only goth/metal chick in a backwater village where the last bus left at 2 p.m. So you can imagine all the Satanist bullcrap I had to put up with. I also went with a crazy card. I was carrying a pocket knife with me all the time. I cut myself with it. Couldn't bear the thought of someone touching it. And then this one time I was walking down the hallway and I heard that little crap yelling, "Satan!" behind me. So quick as lightning, I turned around, grabbed him, and was pressing my pocket knife against his neck, hissing that I'll freaking cut him if he doesn't shut up. He did. Then the other dude kept bullying me, and after school I decided to approach him and ask him to stop. He kept threatening to punch me. In the end, he did, and I just saw red. I kicked his knee and pretty much just buried my nails in his neck. They had to pry me off him, dig out every nail solely till I let go. Dude came home looking like a grater was applied to his neck. Nobody wanted to mess with crazy after those incidents. Story 26. Honestly, people don't like to hear it, but punch the little kid in the freaking face. I was horrendously, relentlessly bullied for 4 years straight. I was beaten up, I was called names, I was teased, spat on, had my things stolen or destroyed. Oh, and beaten up loads. Numerous teachers refused to help. Police were even involved on occasion. Age 14, I took up karate. About a year into it, a girl who had started tormenting me tried starting a fight. I began to walk away, but she pushed me over. I got back up and decked the little girl. Fight was instantly over. I got put in inclusion. I was told violence wasn't the answer. You know what else I had tried? Ignoring them. They will hit you harder until you cry. Sitting away from them. They follow you. Hiding in the library at lunch, where I wasn't allowed to eat so I couldn't eat all day. Brown nosing. Nope. Trying to befriend them and be understanding to them. And of course, teachers never protected or backed you up. So I fought back. I punched that nasty little girl in the face and she never came near me again. Some twats yelled, "Kung Fu fighting" at me, but by that point, that was really easy to ignore. Nobody hit me again. Nobody took my stuff again. A new girl started in year 11 and clearly tried to establish herself as well and decided to pick on me. The other kids laughed at her and said, "Hyzenthle will F you up. She can throw a person over her shoulder." I was indeed capable of this back then. I'd leave her alone if I were you. I glared at her across the table. She left me alone. People don't like hearing that you have to fight back, but you do. Martial arts classes are great for fitness, discipline, and self-esteem. And it only takes one fight. Punch that girl. Yeah, take karate. I mean, what's the worst that could happen? You pick up some new moves, some self-esteem, maybe get an old karate master who enters you in the All-Valley Karate Tournament and someone tries to sweep the leg, but then you hit him with the crane kick? Come on, Daniel's son. Story 27. Through years 7 to 9 in secondary school, I was beaten/ganged up on frequently because of my German connection, and the area I live in, London, was blitzed. Was told by my mother to take the hits and let the school sort it. School didn't sort it out, so she told me to let loose. I went cray-cray and broke some noses, one arm, and fractured a few ankles. Stamping their ankles works every time. That was in one fight. I fractured my wrist, lost a tooth, got a few scarrings on my lips from hits. They left me alone at school from then on. But no, I wasn't finished. When outside of school, I saw a few on their own or with their family. I went in for the kill, so to speak. Needed to finish what I started. When in groups, they think they are invincible. On their own, they were scared little piglets. Idiots didn't think what could go down outside the school grounds, where the school has no power. Something tells me the doctor will be seeing a lot of these middle school girls beat up in the coming weeks. You give a little German girl permission to let loose, and, she's letting loose. Attacking them in the wild, she said. Story 28. Broke his skull. It was completely by accident. It was 6th grade. I was outside the bathroom and the bully decided to push me around. Literally, he pushed me down and just laughed at me while I was on the floor. At that moment, I decided enough was enough, so I got up, pinned him against the wall, and started threatening him if he didn't leave me alone. Then this guy dared me to do something about it, so I did. I punched him as hard as I could. His head bounced back directly into the tile wall, and the impact cracked his skull. I still vividly remember the pool of blood when he fell to the top ground. He survived, but he, nor any of his friends, ever messed with me again. Story 29. 20 years after tormenting me, he came over to me in a pub all fake friendly in a completely different country. I was sick, just seeing him after all this time. I said, right, outside, let's sort this. He didn't have a clue what I was talking about, like his actions don't play back in my brain some nights when I just want to sleep, because I've never figured out why he hated me. He couldn't say no now in front of his group without losing face. It was over in minutes. Years of doing Bricky's assistant part-time as a second job had bulked me up. I was stopped by the crowd from throwing him off a bridge. If you believe in closure, I got mine, but I don't feel any better. Sorry for the poor wording. Even my brain doesn't want to think about this. What on earth did this bully do that 20 years later this guy still can't sleep, still can't think about it, and the second he sees him, tries to throw him off a bridge and still doesn't feel any better? I'm glad that you were able to kind of get a little bit of a physical revenge and had a fun challenge, but unfortunately, maybe now in your late 30s, I presume, conversation and understanding might be king if that's something you're still dealing with. As for that guy, if he genuinely doesn't remember, he's got to be so confused. Hey man, it's good to see you. Oh no! Splash. Story 30. Fought back. I cannot claim I always made a great show of it, but by demonstrating I had the will to fight back against bullies or authority in general, I think I presented myself as a target who was more trouble than he was worth. I was also one of the 3 kids in my school who regularly wore a trench coat when Columbine happened. That was my junior year. Kids who knew me knew I wasn't that kind of threat, but faculty and kids outside my year remained suspicious for the rest of my time in school. Not the way I wanted to end my troubles with bullies at school, but it did the trick. Story 31. Flipped the desk at him during a test and clocked him in the face. He snapped my bra right after I told him not to. Had just done my friends and I was like, try me, fool. The school tried to suspend me. I was pulled from class and my grandma was called. His parents were called and they were talking about assault charges and trying to get me expelled. Grandma comes in. So are we pressing charges for SA and legal action against the school for not doing anything about the situation that the teacher is aware of, causing my granddaughter to have to defend herself, then attempting to punish her for doing so? That's retaliation, folks. Grandma told me to do this after I went to the teacher, and he gave me a "he must just like you" line. Man, I never saw so many bright red, angry faces on adults. I got to go back to class, and he was now immediately suspended. I love you, Grandma. I'm sure you're up there watching me waste my time on Reddit thinking, why is she wasting time on her phone when she could be making something? Edit. Forgot the bully part. He bullied all the girls, or more specifically, groped us. Butt, boob, whatever. Pulled our hair, and then would cry if we went to the teacher/yard duty about it. Then would get off with, well, boys are like that, or he must like you. Grandma was like, the F cares if he likes you. You said no, end of story. Clock him and he won't do it again. Sounds like a disher that can't take it. Do it in front of the class if possible so he can't lie. Man, I miss her. Story 32. When I started inner city public school, I was fluent in German, made pottery, played classical violin and piano, and was at least 5 years ahead of everyone in my class in math. I didn't even know what was happening when someone started pummeling my face. Fast forward 2 years, a guy said he was going to kick my butt after class. I waited until just before the bell rang, walked over to him in front of the whole class and the shop teacher yelling at me to sit down because it wasn't time to leave yet, and smashed his head into a shop vise and knocked out 4 of his front teeth. I became a product of my environment. Garbage in, garbage out. Product of my environment is such a good line, dude. Hopefully the guy at least apologized after you knocked all his teeth out. I'm sorry. Story 33. Challenged him to a fight. I didn't think it would happen. He showed, and it was only after he landed a couple of punches did I get super angry and started really fighting. Punched him in the face, and he got mad because he thought I damaged his braces. Cop showed up, took me home. My parents not only told me they were proud of me for standing up for myself, but they told the other kids' parents to pound sand when they called about the braces. I wasn't aware that someone with braces could be the bully. Story 34. Not a high school bully, but a kid who was supposedly my best friend started to tease and bully me relentlessly in 5th grade. One day he kept pushing me around in the hall while saying, "Can't see in the dark." I got tired of it and stabbed him in the side with my freshly sharpened number 2 pencil and broke the tip off, leaving it embedded in his flesh. He left me alone after that. Another time in 3rd grade, a group of kids decided they wanted to beat me up. I whipped out my penis and peed all over them and ran away. They never bothered me again. You know, not every fight has to be won with fists. Story 35. Never really had a dedicated bully since everyone assumed I was a school shooter. Their basis for this was because I was impoverished and loved telling stories of my home antics to see people's reactions. Nonetheless, I just went about life pushing past the glares and assumptions. Some of the worst people I had to deal with were also the preppy upper middle class. They talked a lot about becoming something after high school or having grand ideas for their future, but 3 years later, and they bag my groceries and live with their parents. Meanwhile, I've been living on my own and currently on track towards the Marines. My advice? Use spite to fuel you. Be someone who reached their dreams. Be what they wish they were. Story 36. I'd already had my flip out moment, so people kept the bullying to low-key teasing and breaking into my locker to steal my wallet. Teasing stopped when, after saying I would be the next Columbine shooter, I replied that I wouldn't use guns, they are too noisy. Most peaceful ride to the class site that entire year. Honestly, most of them knew I was a marshmallow. Don't think any had been present when I flipped out in 6th grade after being attacked at school too many times. Story 37. New kid in school, 9th grade, looking for someone to bully. Picked me. In class. We had labs, and at the lab table was talking stupid. I laughed at him and said something that got a laugh. Immediately, the teacher told the class to get back to their seats. His seat was in front of mine. He turns around and says, "I'll see you after school." He said it loud enough for the other boys and girls to hear. I punched him in the face, came over the desk, and got in one more shot in before the teacher heaved me up and out. Weird thing is, we never saw him again. Rumor mill said he was a discipline transfer already and that he was expelled. But I don't know. I sat in the vice principal's anteroom cooling my jets. Then he walks in briskly, indicates for me to follow. He sits at his desk and blows air out through his lips. He says, "Have I seen you in here before?" I say no. "What happened?" he asks. I tell him I was calmed down by then. The secretary hands him a thin folder, which he perused. Taps pencil on desk. He looked at me and said 3-day suspension. Don't do it again. He got up, went to the secretary, told her to find me something to do. He went back in his office and closed the door. He called my dad, whose only question was, did I win? Hey, it was the 70s. Anyway, I watched a lot of TV that week and spent the first day with my dad. 2 thumbs up. I found out later that the teacher gave a version favorable to me and that the VP was acquainted with my dad through a community club. Story 38. Show them you are not afraid. Say, "I'm not afraid to lose to you because you will remember fighting me for days. You might win, but you will be limping." I used to get bullied a lot, but one day I decided that it would hurt less to get punched in the face than to dwell over being a coward. The day I decided that, decades ago, was the last day I ever have been bullied. I never even had to fight. I just carried myself differently. Since then, I have friends that call me the bully of bullies. If I see someone else being a bully to someone, I'll make it my mission to make them feel like crap. Not all heroes wear capes, but some of them do post on Reddit. Story 39. I was bullied from grade 8 until 11, and I had several bullies. Everything would happen, including stereotypically being stuffed in a locker where a janitor/maintenance worker had to break me out of a busted lock. I'd been punched, spat on, had my sketchbook torn up, my sister, who is black, and me, brown, degraded on for our skin multiple times. One bully in particular, Jordan, would beat me after school, or if he saw me playing basketball or soccer with the few friends I did have. There was one day in grade 11 in particular. It was spring, and I snapped. I don't remember what the issue was that day, but it could have been something as simple as the clothing I wore looking cheap or relevant. He tried to grab me, usually resulting in a headlock, but I decided to try and fight back. It got really bad. I had my head slammed into a locker. It resulted in a laceration requiring stitches, and my nose was broken. I managed to hit Jordan hard enough to sort of bust his lip, and I bought myself some time to get away. Students at that time didn't really have cell phones, but they did stare. It took 10 minutes for a teacher and a school liaison, security dude, to show up. By then, I was in the nurse wing and eventually transferred to a hospital, where they later found out the student doctor didn't set my nose correctly. I still have a weird lump in my nose to this day from that fight. After we scrapped, they forced me to sit down with this POS and accept his half-butted apology. I was then instructed to explain how I could better handle differences in the future. They didn't suspend this kid, and I was given a warning for fighting. All in all, it was a miserable situation. There was only one silver lining. He never bothered me again after that. Whether he just got bored or who knows, maybe because I fought back, but it stopped. It took me suffering a concussion during a time when my depression was already extremely bad from other pressures of high school for someone to back off. Years down the road, he ran into me at a restaurant. He's a banking accountant now for some yuppie CEO. He changed his life and recognized me, hoping for some kind of interaction or forgiveness. I simply looked at him and said, "Talk to me again and I'll stick you with a blade from your ribs to your heart." And I walked away. Yes, it was a threat. Yes, I do sometimes carry a tool on me. Yes, it's not the right way to deal with things. But why should I forgive someone just because they have a perfect life? I moved on, but I don't forget. I'm in my 30s now, and I feel bad for these Zoomers who might be a little different or keep to themselves. They get dragged in high school, whether by gangs, social media, or some other BS. It's all popularity politics, and the people who run this decrepit out-of-state education system have no clue just how bad it is. It just goes to show again, you don't have to win the fight to get them to back off. You just gotta stand up for yourself. Also, it is kind of funny that he mentioned the dude has a perfect life now, but he's a banking accountant, as if that was the sexiest of all jobs. I'm so jealous of his life and the way he does all those taxes. Story 40. I was a bully because my home life was crap. I was constantly sleep deprived due to alcoholic parents being up all night with their adult loser friends, and I would take it out on others. One day I got on my bus and a new kid that had recently moved was sitting in my seat. We did not have assigned seats. I just decided it was mine and he was in it. I punched him in the eye and nearly knocked him out. It swelled up instantly and he looked like a cartoon. When we got to school, the driver, knowing me and not him, assumed he started it. I got 1 day bus suspension. He got 3 days of school suspension. When I returned to the bus a day later, a girl I considered to be a good friend and who I secretly liked told me, "Don't ever speak to me again. You take your crap out on other people instead of dealing with your own problems. I hate bullies and you're a bully, so you can screw off forever. We're not friends." I needed someone that I cared about to tell me to grab a mirror and stop being the villain in this movie. She was right, and I never bullied another person. 30 years and counting since that wake-up call. I've taught my son to stand up for anyone he ever sees being a bully, because he is usually the big kid in any group. Okay, I still don't feel like we got justice for the kid you sucker punched. Sure, a girl said, "We're not friends anymore." But you bullied everybody in high school? You didn't get your just desserts yet. I still think someone needs to beat this guy up. Story 41. Might receive some boo birds to this one, because I'm a dude and the bully was a loud female. But there was some harassment involved that had to be ended. I'm not particularly proud of how I handled it, but I was sorta in an awkward spot. This girl and I always had a weird love-hate relationship. We had known each other for a long time and typically always were cordial, but for some reason in the year or two prior, it became her hobby to be really mean. Didn't really bother me as I was just as big of a smart butt back then. Basically, when I was about 16, I was dating a girl who was 15. Let's just say her last name was Williams. Well, this girl, who for some reason loved to make fun of me, started calling her my Williams whore. This would happen at least 3 times a week, if not daily, for a couple of months. Fast forward to my girlfriend having a random home accident that merited her going to the ER and having to wear a medical device for about 6 weeks. This girl would then start saying things related to the accident and device. Paraphrasing, maybe, things like, "Hey, how's your Williams whore doing? When is she going to get her device off?" And would add a different comment or two each time. Well, one day she did it and it just lit a fire under me, and I thought to myself that it was going to be the last time she said it. and that the next time it happened, I was going to slap her. Now, I didn't mention it, but at the time her boyfriend was one of my best friends, so she almost saw this as a green light to make fun of me since I guess she was friends by proxy. Fast forward, a week or two down the road, she was with some friends, ran up to me and said, "Hey, where's your Williams whore at tonight?" To which I responded with a very weak-handed slap to her face. I am not proud I did this to this girl and I lost sleep over it, but it was probably the weakest slap you could deliver and still call it a slap. It wouldn't have even made a baby cry, but it sent the message that it was done. I then said, "You're not gonna call her that again." Her boyfriend was mad. She cussed me, he cussed me, and I think punched me in the arm or something. But the moral of the story is she stopped, and I don't think ever harassed me or my girlfriend negatively again. We were even sort of friends after that. Her and my friend kept dating, and I even said, "I'm happy for them," several times. Fast forward 20 plus years, we're friends on social media, comment on each other's posts regularly, and even were friends in college. Good for them. But whatever happened to Williams whore? Story 42. I was 12, he was 15 in 8th grade. I wrestled, played football, baseball, ran track, and lifted. He was much bigger and stronger than me and used to come at me with 3 other people just to torment me. I tried fighting back but got beat down. No one would really help me for fear of him and his goons. School was worthless. They did nothing. My parents tried, but nothing helped. So I met his dad. His dad was a business leader in town. Not sure exactly the title, now I'm 39, and he would go be at all our functions and fundraisers and sporting events. So every time in that week I was bullied, I made my way over to where he was talking to someone and I'd sneak up and punch him in his penis. Of course I got in trouble. Of course I got bullied again after that, but I would find him and hit him. When asked why, I'd say, "Ask your son." Every time. I was grounded and about to be kicked out of my wrestling club. Then at wrestling, he showed up with his son. My mom showed up, and my mom, his dad, my coach, myself had a talk with him just listening. I explained why I kept hitting him and why if no one was willing to stop him and his friends, then I won't stop either. It ended that night. Dude, that's insane for a 12-year-old. To be like, you know what, you're gonna bully me? Well, I'm gonna bully your dad. What about it? Story 43. His locker was close to mine, but the bottom locker. One day, he and his friends came over and gave me crap. Ripped open my backpack and threw the contents out while one of them tried to pull my pants down, I think. Thanks, Belt. Main bully's friends left, and as he's getting his stuff out of his locker, continues to mock and ridicule me. Had it at that point, so while he's still pulling stuff out of his locker, quickly kicked the locker door shut, slamming it hard on his fingers. Did it a second time right after because he left his hand there still, so slammed his fingers a second time but harder, at which point he cradled his hand, walked away to class, and he never bothered me again. Ironically, his buddies who bullied me found out, and 2 of them gave me a fist bump out of respect for doing it, and none of them bothered me either. Story 44. This is really hard for me to talk about, but here we go. As a youth in the 90s, having ADHD meant you either got medicated and ostracized, or you were labeled a problem. Anyway, I was one of the many medicated kids with ADHD, and up until I went to middle school, I didn't have any issues. Anyway, fast forward to high school, and I was just barely making it, both socially and academically. On top of this, I dressed pretty stupidly. I was told several times I looked like a crackhead dressed me by my friends. I ended up becoming a target of one of the seniors. A kid I later found out was a pastor's son. He really didn't do much at first, but once kids who I'd been friends with started jumping in, it got so much worse. I remember the day after the pastor's kid started a bunch of other kids I'd known for years and thought I was friends with, decided to grab all of the desks around mine and made my life hell. The first day was spent pretty much trying to keep them from taking my bag and pencil. Second day started the hitting. Third day I kind of went, but nuclear. I remember one of the guys kicked me hard in the ribs and kept his leg there longer than he should because stabbed it with a mechanical pencil. They doubled down until I screamed that I was going to come back the next day with a gun and shoot them. I'm going to be clear, I was bluffing. While my parents did have guns, I didn't know the first thing about how to use them, how to fire them, etc. Anyways, the reaction I got wasn't what I counted on. Instead, they made fun of me and called my bluff. Thank God the teacher was there. He made those kids wait in the room after class while I went to the principal's office. I was technically expelled for 2 weeks and had to have counseling session before I was allowed to return. The kids who picked on me got maybe 3-day suspension, and the ones who were on the football team were removed from the team that season. On the plus side, I wasn't picked on again in that school. This probably isn't the story you wanted to read. There's no story of success here, but my teacher saved me thankfully. Also, I was officially diagnosed with ADHD when I was 24. Story 45. He sat in front of me in class one day, kept putting his head on my desk while he bullied me and made fun of me. The teacher didn't care. I ran out of patience, grabbed a fistful of his hair, and slammed his head into the desk as hard as I could. He sat up. The teacher started yelling at me, and this kid says, No, miss, it's okay. I deserved it. We were on good terms after that. I think I got some respect from him, and he got some respect from me for accepting it. 2. Kept stealing my lunch, as dumb as it sounds. I thought it was childish, so I kinda just ignored it for a while. But one day he tried to steal my chocolate pudding cup, and I was like, you know what? Not today. Not my pudding cup. I told him to knock it off, and he just laughed and kept making fun of me. He grabbed my pudding cup and turned to walk away, so I just grabbed his hoodie and pulled as hard as I could, sending him falling against the table, chairs, and onto the floor. I picked up my pudding cup and went back to eating. That kid never looked at me again. Only a few times I ever got aggressive, but dang did it work. Lesson 1 of the streets. Never mess with another man's snack pack. Story 46. Knifed him. He'd push me into my locker at the same time every day. I brought a small knife to school and waited for him at my locker. I saw him out of the corner of my eye get ready to push, so I whirled around and gave him a slash along his forearm. He said, "Ah!" and then punched me in the shoulder. He never touched me after that. He even showed me the 6-inch wound I gave him a week later. Look what you did! Shrug. Don't push people into their locker every day. Story 47. I was a very fat metalhead at school, so I was bullied by basically the whole male populace of the class, which honestly did not really bother me. I was really into studying music, movies, and literature, and had always been a recluse. So I was basically okay with going through some abuse at school because I had ways to entertain myself and be happy at home. But then I somehow managed to get myself a really hot girlfriend. We bonded over Pushkin and Metallica, and I was embarrassed to be bullied in her presence. So I approached the biggest dude in my class, an aspiring boxer, and offered him help with class assignments and exams in exchange of protection. The first time I got picked on, he beat the crap hole to a pulp. No one messed with me afterwards, and me and the boxer eventually became best friends for life. And that guy was Mike Tyson's tutor. Story 48. I'll always remember my mom's favorite account of me standing up for myself. I was in elementary school on my way home, and a kid was hitting my head with a book repeatedly, like light taps. The bus driver wouldn't do anything, so after the kid started up again, I grabbed the book out of his hand and whomped him with it. Apparently, the mother talked to my mom and said she wanted to yell at me or something, but my mom defended me as well. Talk about throwing the book at someone. Story 49. After screwing with me for a solid month in freshman year, one day this football player, forgot his name, got the bright idea to walk up to me and slap the crap out of me in the middle of class for craps and giggles. I started to look back to his friends to see the reactions, and I instinctually started punching him in the face. His friends went from laughing to looks of horror real quick. No thinking, I was out for blood. The teacher had to come and break us up. Ended up doing some ISS for a few weeks after that. 2 years later, I was put in assigned seats junior year of high school, and guess who was placed right next to me and into a group for the whole year? That dude. He ended up having a huge growth spurt and was a solid 4 to 6 inches taller to when we fought. I thought I was going to be demolished after our previous fight a few years ago since he towered over me by almost a foot after his spurt. Come to find out after talking with him, we buried the hatchet. He said he respected me after that fight as no one he's ever bullied had ever attempted to beat the crap out of him like that. As an added bonus, word went around quick and no one tried to mess with me physically for the remainder of high school. Wouldn't recommend doing what I did as I don't enjoy fighting, but he upset me to the point I didn't care. All in all, sometimes these guys just need a few punches in the face to humble them back to earth, knowing they can't go around doing whatever they want to who they deem defenseless. Yeah, I love that for this dude. Although, to be fair, the guy, wasn't paying attention. He was looking at his friends like, isn't this awesome? I'm freaking bullying this kid. And then he kind of sucker punches him, And then years later, he's like, I respect you so much for the way you just freaking punched me in the face and pummeled me while I wasn't paying attention. That was class. Glad they're on the same page, though. Story 50. I've had my fair share of bullies growing up. As a kid, I was super tall and super skinny, a prime target. My first bully was from 2nd grade all through 7th grade. In that time, I would get bullied, verbal and physical. Tell my folks, yes, I cried at times during telling them, had meetings with the principal, etc., etc. Nothing stopped him. Then in 7th grade, he came and did a swift kick to my groin, making me pass out briefly. When I came to, I jumped him and beat the snot out of him. No one stopped me, and I did not get in trouble because it was called self-defense. That bully never bullied me again, but found some other kid to bully. My second bully was freshman year of high school. This bully did not last long. By then, I had started to get some muscle. This bully was more verbal than physical. However, one day during PE, he had his keys on a leash and started swinging them around Bruce Lee style. He kept getting closer and closer to me. I told him to back off, loud enough so all could hear. He took that as a challenge and took one step too close, and his keys slashed my forehead to my eye. Not a lot of blood, but the whole gym went silent. I looked up and he went white. Later found out I looked scary with an angry face and blood trickling down. The teacher finally came over and escorted him. He was expelled. The last bully I can remember was my junior year of high school. The bully was a freshman. I know it sounds odd. However, this bully boasted about how he was in a gang. Why he bullied me, I don't know. He was more a verbal bully, saying he would hurt my family, do X or Y to them. Then after school, him and his buddies would taunt me to fight him. I always thought this was odd because he was 2 feet shorter than me. Finally, one day he struck a chord. But I don't like fighting or hurting people, so I took it internally. My folks asked me what was up, and after my mother going, "I'm your mother and I know something is up," I told her. I went to the dean, and turns out this bully has a rap sheet of complaints. After I spoke with the dean, someone else gave a tip the bully had hard drugs. A quick police dog sniff out, and that kid was sent off to jail. After that, I started getting serious into swimming and water polo. Turns out you don't need big muscles, but having some muscle will stop bullies from bullying you. You gotta love it. I'm proud of you, man. Although, he did kind of spend the entire story just talking about how cool and buff he was getting. Story 51. My high school bully would say some of the most racist/insensitive phrases I've heard to this day, now being 10 years older. And I had man boobs at this phase of my life that would scoop almost every day. He did this for all of freshman year and halfway through sophomore year until he went in for the scoop one day in homeroom, and I grabbed his right hand, the hand going in for the scoop, oriented it from the cup to like we were holding hands, fingers in between, and I pushed his fingers down back to his wrist with every single ounce of my power and might. He immediately fell to both his knees and yelled louder than anyone I've heard still to this day, and he never messed with me again. Awesome for this guy, but sad that, you've been bean dipped one too many times when you keep referring to it as the scoop. Story 52. This girl in my year was much physically larger, both taller and meatier, than most other people in my year, and seriously had a problem with me, as did her younger sister. It was common to pick on me as I was a chubby kid and an easy target. One day I was walking home, and the girl, I'll call her M, was following me with her sister, I'll call her J, close behind. As they caught up with me, J had a big branch and was hitting me with it, to which I turned around and told them to basically screw off. After being continuously hit with this stupid stick a few times, we got into a bit of a heated argument. M then threatened me by saying, "If you touch J, I'll jump you," which pretty much backed me into a corner because she was so much physically larger and stronger than me. Knowing this, J used it to her advantage and began to escalate. She began pulling my hair, punching, slapping, and then even grabbing my arms and hands and scratching me at this point. I was crying as I walked down the street. This went on for much longer than it should have before I figured I had enough. At the time, I played Clarinet, and my pieces were kept in a heavy, hard plastic case. So when I hit my breaking point, I swung my arm around as hard and as quick as I could and whacked it right into M's face. As soon as the two connected, I saw M's face contort with pain and shock. M then legged it out of sight, and Jay quickly followed. After that, all I received was a few snarky comments now and again. As much as Jay deserved one of what M got, I'm still pretty content with the turnout. I still to this day don't really know what I did to deserve to be bullied, but I'm glad as kids grow they often realize bullying is embarrassing. Story 53. Standing up for yourself at a young age, adults tend to undermine what you say. When I was bullied in my high school, my bully was having a really bad day and tried taking it out on me. He pretended to hit me, but I didn't flinch. He started insulting me, and I did the same thing back. He tried getting me in a headlock, and I stomped on his foot as hard as I could, almost breaking it. I was a fat kid back then. Bullies prey on people that do not fight back. But when there is some sort of retaliation, or they know it's not going to be easy, they tend to back off. Story 54. Well, in junior high, I accidentally pulled a very big brain move. Basically, this kid was always vandalizing my books, getting physical with me, etc. He also tended to vandalize school property by drawing penises low-key. And I just so happened to be the art kid and the kid who did other people's homework sometimes. Fighting him didn't work. Telling on him didn't work. So one day, I just decided to be petty. I started low-key taking textbooks home from school and vandalizing them myself, but making it look like he did it, like imitating his art style and his handwriting. I did this to one book every night for about a week. In 6th grade, me just figured, oh man, this is gonna get him so yelled at, it's gonna be so funny. But nah, bro. Our teacher had the kids use the social studies textbooks and found some of these vulgar drawings during a lesson on a day where I wasn't there, and she tore him a new one. I had done so much damage, I screwed up like 5 of the 30 books we had, that he got freaking suspended for the rest of the year. It was June already, so that was only like 2 to 3 weeks, but still, it was bad. Apparently he had to deal with the school board of our district or some crap. And the boy was moving too, moving far away, like about to move in the summer right after 7th grade would start here. So I basically robbed him of the last end of school year shenanigans he would ever have with his friends in our state. Now that is a big brain move, especially in 6th grade, my goodness. I like to think all it really was just more penis drawings, and they found them, they're like, oh, penises are everywhere. You know who draws penises? Danny. Yep, Danny, that's the penis kid. Book him. Story 55. I was at a skating rink after moving to a new school across the country. My boyfriend was visiting me, and I'd been lying to him that I had a lot of friends in my new town and that I had a great social life, which was painfully untrue. My usual bully, who was a heartless lady, decided to approach me and embarrass me in front of my boyfriend. Later, she even had a bunch of people circle me in the rink and torment me. My boyfriend watched the whole thing. It was horrific, and I was so embarrassed. Later on, after I finished crying in a dark room at the skating rink, I came out and found that turd. I'd had enough. I took a skate and without thought smashed it into her head like it was Thor's hammer. Unfortunately, it got me arrested. Nah, put it on ice, she'll be fine. Story 56. My school bully would constantly make fun of me. He had his own challenges. Mental disabilities, but built like a granite obelisk. He would poke and poke and poke and poke, and one day I blew up on him in gym class, screaming obscenities at him for a solid minute, absolutely berating him. I then ran off and a school teacher found me and took me to the principal. He never said a word to me after that. He's probably still fantasizing about the Titanic. What a butthole. TLDR. Someone with a mental disability poked OP and he cussed him out for a minute. Jeez. Story 57. Finally told the butthole to square up after lunch. We were outside and he was slightly in front of a tree. He thought I was bluffing and I just started to windmill my arms. Caught him decently once. He started to stagger and fall against the tree. I pounced as he slid down and headbutted him till a teacher came around and pulled me off. Got sent to the office and we both got suspended somehow. As we were escorted off property by our parents, I told him if he ever looked at me cross-eyed again, I'd find him something harder to hit him with. He left me alone after that. Story 58. Not high school, but in middle school, a kid always bullied everyone. One time after school, I was sitting in a bench by myself waiting for my dad to pick me up. Out of nowhere, he came and kneed me right in the face. I got up and punched him in the face. We started wrestling and I end up on top. I start punching him until he tells me to stop. I let him get up. He tried hitting me again, but he was wobbly and just fell on the ground. I get on top and start hitting him again and I knocked him out. I had never been in a fight like that. I legitimately freaked out thinking I killed the kid. I tried to get him to stand up and wake up. After about 3 minutes, which felt like 3 hours, he finally came to, and I was able to breathe again. He walked away all wobbly. He never bullied me again, but he kept bullying other people. After a couple months, he was arrested for something and never came back to school. Never saw him again. Screw him. Story 59. So I had a guy in my class that used to bully me because I couldn't speak properly. I just moved from another country. Then the teacher decided to put us on the same table. One day in history class, he had a leather glove with him, and every time the teacher turned her back to us, he would slap me with the glove. He did that like 5 times. I asked him to stop and he would laugh, saying, "What you going to do?" My class was laughing as well. So at one point I lost it. I grabbed his head and slammed it on the table in the middle of the class. He felt so embarrassed. He learned his lesson. After that, he stopped bullying me. Who slaps somebody with a glove anyway? Like they're British? I say, don't speak with such poor English. Well, you know what? I'm assuming when he slammed his head into the table, he felt a little more than just embarrassed. I say, did that had? Story 60. Not me, but a friend's bully. His dad is absolutely jacked out of his mind, and my mate told him how he was getting bullied by kids in a higher year than he was in. So his dad picked him up with his Mercedes. I'm not good with cars, but even I know it must have costed a lot. And he waited for the big kid to follow his son. Then he pulled out when his son walked next to the car, and he simply said, "Here you go, sir," then closed the door. Then he whispered something to the big kid. Haven't seen him since. Story 61. This turd football player used to mess with my friend and I in class. The teachers hated him because he and his clique were always disrupting the lesson. My sweet, sweet Japanese teacher smashed a perfectly good projector in frustration at this dude. One day he was bragging about his tackling ability and about how he could bulldoze my friend and I. My friend, a black belt in karate, Taekwondo, and Aikido enthusiast, replied by explaining that using his own momentum could easily be used against him. He didn't take well to that, but left. A few days later, he decided to test our hypothesis and charged me at the end of class. I was turned away from him, but noticed and using my foot, moved my desk into his path. He hit it and got angry at me. Shoving the desk aside, he launched a forward kick at me, which I stepped back from to avoid. I saw a golden opportunity with his dangling airborne foot and used my own kick to send his leg much higher than he was prepared for. Now reeling, his bent knee became final target. A slight nudge collapsed his stance. He fell on his back, humiliated, and my Japanese teacher clapped. My friend and I very promptly ran because even though I had gotten him, he had curb stomped a dude that year, and we were very afraid of what he would do. But he never looked my way again, except once when I passed him in a grocery store. The end. You know you're a douche when you upset the Japanese. I don't mean to stereotype, but they are some of the kindest and most patient people I have ever known. Story 62. I headbutted him hard enough in the nose that I crushed his nose and cut my forehead. Some of his face was bruised for nearly a month and his nose healed crooked. Mind you, I didn't just snap my head forward. I grabbed his jacket, shoved him backwards to throw him off balance, and then yanked him forward while driving my forehead into his face. The impact nearly gave me a concussion. It's the only time I've ever resorted to violence to solve a problem with someone, but he'd spent a long time harassing me because I wasn't willing to fight back, and I finally snapped. For a first-timer in the violence scene, he's got a pretty good headbutt. Story 63. My cousin had a middle school bully. My cousin was kinda chubby and a bit on the nerdy side back then. This bully was relentless and nobody did anything about it. One day the bully cornered him and was pushing him around. My cousin just snapped and whacked the kid in the face with his metal lunchbox. The kid had a big bruise on his cheek and broke his nose. He honestly never messed with him ever again. I do not really advocate for violence, but in this instance, it actually solved something. I guess you could say, in the end, the cousin made that bully eat his words. Story 64. Fighting back. Had bullies my whole life. Got bullied by Mexicans because I was the only white kid in the neighborhood. Bullied for having a speech impediment. Bullied for being poor. Bullied for being homeschooled. One day my dad told me, "You're on your own and can't come to me to save you, you just never start a fight. But if someone swings at you, go ahead and punch back." I took that to heart. Happened to be a good athlete, so I would beat them in all sports, but that didn't really humble them. So then I started defending myself and fighting back. Turned out I was good at fighting. Sort of became the bully and went to find every bully and best them. It worked. By sophomore year, most people respected me and either we became friends or we left each other alone. Still had a few groups that didn't like me, but almost didn't matter at that point. Eventually beat a couple of them. One of the most common names they called me was an orangutan. Don't really know why because I'm not a redhead, but now I've adopted the orangutan as my spirit animal next to the toucan. Story 65. He took my backpack on a city bus one time and walked with it to the back of the bus. He picked on me my whole life. Always messed with me. Anyway, this time was different. I was so angry and fed up with him treating me the way he did, and I followed him to the back of the bus where I started throwing lefts and rights at him and he just cowered. It was awesome. I got kicked off the bus and I happily got off without issue. He never messed with me after that. He's a loser. Story 66. I was getting bullied a lot for being gay, despite not being overly effeminate or out of the closet. Despite the constant bullying, I managed to find myself fully enjoying being gay on the weekends by hooking up with older men on Grindr. Yes, I'm aware now 10 years later that this was in fact very screwed up at my age. However, all too common. One fateful weekend I hit it off with a married guy, and he invited me over to fool around. When I got to his house, I was greeting with several large family photos revealing that this man was the father of one of my most abusive bullies at school. I went through with the deed, of course. Next time the guy at school started screwing with me, asking how many penises I had been with that weekend, I looked at him and said, "Just one, your dad's," and followed it up with, "Nice living room, by the way. Always great to see so many family pictures. Though I wonder what your mom would think." He didn't believe it until word spread and the school got involved. Luckily for the dad and myself, I was freshly 18, though the guy never talked to me or did anything again. 10 out of 10 would bone again. Wow, this is like a Call of Duty lobby, but he actually did sleep with the kid's parents. Brutal. Story 67. My class and I were waiting for the teacher at the classroom door. He was around the corner talking to another kid. I still don't know if it's true or not, but I heard him making jokes about me. He did that directly to me on a daily basis, from jokes to actual insults. He also befriended my friends, so he kicked me out of the social group. I simply snapped. I turned around the corner, blinded by rage, and caught him by surprise with 3 subsequent punches to the face. The first one was the kind of full-strength body-swinging punch, so it made him fall down on his back. I think by the time I threw the last punch, he was already falling because it missed completely. The first thing I remember after the adrenaline rush faded out was he was laying on the floor looking at me in shock. We were taken to the principal's office and explained what happened and why. He apologized for everything and we got away with it. I recovered my friends and all. Sometimes I feel pity for him. He was the kind of bully who was a bully because someone bullied him before, but I'm still proud of this. I had to go and read that back again because for some reason I thought the entire time that the teacher was the bully and he just freaking knocked his dude out.